Illuman. Men helping other men to become better, more authentic men. Please visit our website at illuman.org.
Brothers, good morning. In the reverberation of the rusty, golden-haired man freed, and the echo of golden apples flying and giant keys rising, I'd like to offer you a poem that suggests something of the journey of the male. And I want to invite you, it's already been happening so powerfully, but to become receptive, receive the poem in the body before the mind. Be feminine and soft. Sometimes healthy masculinity looks like femininity finally not strangulated in us. And a wise old grandma told me once that one of the things that we're doing all the time in a secret, sacred way is being seed carriers. We carry the seed of life in our sacred area, and we're always protecting it. And it's extremely powerful. Our seeds are viable through most of our life, actually. And that's a feminine thing, to carry and hold those seeds. And some of us have seen those seeds bear fruit in our sons, as our sons and daughters, and others have seen them bear fruit in another way. But let the poem, it's the word Joe said, penetrate, touch you. Every boy needing adventure dreams of some immensity happening through him, the glow of which will never fully rub off. Every boy needing adventure dreams of some immensity happening through him, the glow of which will never fully rub off. Most old men, having adventured, are content to disappear into the wood and hear the lilt of their gloried name no more. So what is the territory between? And who has danced that passage marvelously? Countless males have leaped into the jaws of their death song, chasing the feel of that thunderstruck glow. Countless others have folded inward and drowned in the sludge of false burdens falsely slung upon them. False burdens falsely slung upon us. Brothers, what is it we cannot know until we have slipped through the mythic gateway of the forest, and thus cannot tell our sons, only point the way for them? Sometimes the darkness ahead and the silence surrounding are so complete that even a star won't spill out its glitter. Even a bird won't chirp. If we lit a torch in that deepened dream place, we'd forget everything shown to us of the world by many underworldly figures. Each of us men, then, must go when called, without lamp or map, and find our way through a long, thick wilderness, at once dazzling and terrifying, and all our own, though within it we are powerfully not alone. What is it we cannot know until we have slipped through the mythic gateway of the forest, and thus cannot tell our sons, cannot tell our brothers, only point the way for them? Each of us men must go, when we're called, through the gateway, into the forest, into the other world, and find our way without lamp or map through a long, thick wilderness that is at once dazzling and terrifying, and all our own, uniquely our own, though within it we are powerfully not alone. We are accompanied by the wild ecology and by each other. Because when one brother is on the mountain, the rest of us hold the fire for him. When one brother is out fasting, one of us puts food on the earth for him and speaks his name. And when he comes back, we stand to mirror and affirm his transformation from the time in the other world with a capital O. Ho. And it only takes 2 minutes, but I want to land this poem in you by inviting you into a dialogue with one other man, completely different from any dialogue you've had before. You can sit down or stand, but face one man and say something to him through a gesture. This is poetic, mytho-poetic language, so it's not a one-to-one representation. But whatever your body wants to speak about where you are on the journey. Maybe you say, and the other man responds with whatever gesture represents where he is on the journey. And then one line in language. It could be from something that you experienced on the land, but again, something that it doesn't quite try to pinpoint where you are on the journey, but just suggests, in the realm of metaphor, something like, but speak as another entity. I am the lizard scampering from rock to rock, finally turning my face to the sun. Or don't even name yourself. I have pushed out all my gold and will scatter it upon the earth to feed the soil. Aho. So just turn to the man next to you. Just gesture and gesture back and then speak. One line.
Good morning, brothers. Good morning. Just a little bit of explaining. We sit between two deep and important wells. The well of Sister Water reminds us that we are nurtured and nourished, cleansed and released in the power of the Creator's gift. And behind us is the wonderful well of Brother Fire, the symbol of transformation, of necessary destruction, and rebuilding in a new and fiery way. And so, as you probably notice, what we're doing for you is presenting to you different ways of caring and sharing the teaching that we hold so dear as men of wisdom. Last year we focused on the form of lecture. This year we're offering you 5 different ways. Last night we heard the gift of unpacking the power of the story and the wisdom that's embedded inside. Tonight we'll hear the wisdom of a shared soulful conversation. Yesterday we experienced here the gift of counsel. And now we're going to share with you the gift of a teaching counsel. And so we began with a dedication. I dedicate our time together to the yearning of all men, the yearning for wholeness, the yearning for our sense of coming together as equal human beings. Ho. Ho, ho.
Brothers, as we gather here beneath the tree of wisdom, I remind us of our intentions. First, to speak from the heart, to come from a place deep within. Second, to listen from the heart, to pay attention to more than just the words that are shared, but the silence between the stories, the inflection of our voices, our body language, that we will be lean of expression out of respect for one another, and that we will remain spontaneous and open to what comes in this moment. Ho? Ho. So I offer an opening prompt to us brothers to check in quickly, and the prompt is simply this: what is saving you right now? What is saving you right now? And because we are moving quickly from this council to a council with nature, we don't have time to explain why, but just make a statement in a sentence, what it is that is saving you right now, supporting you, helping you, honoring you, affirming you, providing you what you need. I am being saved right now by my 29-year-old son, who is treating me like a peer and a brother. Ho.
I'm being saved by the appearance of wild geese heading home again in the clean blue air as I prepare within me to head home again. Home.
Silence and solitude are saving me.
I'm being saved by the anticipation of coming closer than ever before. Oh.
I'm being saved by a daily sit and practicing pure observation of my thoughts, my feelings, my activities. Ho.
I'm being saved by my own brokenness. Ho.
I'm being saved by the buttons in me that are getting pushed by my children that I didn't know I had. Oh.
Oh. We're turning again back to our vision for what this work is about. And today we're focused on a line that has meant something to us for some time, and it's simply this: that we are men who are fed by the wisdom traditions of forgiveness and radical inclusivity. We are men who are fed by the wisdom traditions of forgiveness and radical inclusivity. So the prompt is simply this. We're going to unpack it a little bit in the next few minutes here, and then out in nature, and then in our council circles as the men gather at Cottonwood. What does it mean for us to be fed by the wisdom traditions of forgiveness and radical inclusivity? I believe if this tree could talk, and it almost can, I see words like nurture and I am who I am, love and life, and there hanging next to Ned is the word forgiveness. That this tree would tell us that we all come from the same source, that we all derive from the same divine reality, and that in that source we find our identity, that there's something of that divine reality in each one of us and in all of creation, and that our lives are to find their fullest sense in relationship to that divine reality, that we somehow have to seek union with the very place from which we came. And we can see that in each other if we look deeply. Ho, ho. It's right here in our midst, and it's out there beneath the mountain and beneath that sky. But we forget, brothers, so often this unitive consciousness that the wisdom tradition calls us into. And instead we compare and contrast ourselves to each other and to everything around us. We divide the world apart. And we speak of others when there really is no other. Ho. And we draw circles. And we're always inside the circle, and somebody is left outside that circle. The mystic Matilda Magdeburg said that the day of my spiritual awakening was the day I saw and I knew I saw God in all things and all things in God. The day of my spiritual awakening was the day I saw and I knew I saw God in all things and all things in God. Brothers, I invite you again to just turn to a man next to you and to share a time in your life when you saw and you knew you saw God in all things and all things in God. Take just a moment to have that conversation, to get in touch with that experience in your life. One moment when you knew that to be true.
So one of the streams that feeds the wisdom tradition is forgiveness. And I assume that every man here in this room has not only heard the word, but perhaps struggled with the practice. Forgiveness is a biblical word that very simply means letting go. Letting go of blame, letting go of desire for revenge, letting go of being stuck in the past, letting go of judgment against self, letting go again and again and again, as Richard taught us this morning with that wonderful embodied practice. Letting go 1,000, million times to be able to receive the new self, the gifted self, the wonderful self, the beautiful self, that again we were taught to hold, to honor, and respect. I'd like to share with you a practice that I learned many, many years ago that's really helped me personally and helped many, many people. How do you do forgiveness? So many of the great wisdom teachers just say, do it. They don't give you the step-by-step thing. It's left to men like us to fumble and stumble and figure out ways that work. Here's a tried and true method. First step, very simply, is to admit you've been hurt. Admit that you've been wounded, and don't be afraid to show the wound. I got it. As simply as somebody calling you a name, or somebody that ignored you, something that's painfully obvious that, it's a little thing, but it wounded you. That first step, to me, is the hardest one, to admit you got it. You got hurt. Stay with that as long as it takes. Sometimes you'll find that that seemingly innocuous wound taps into a much deeper wound from a different angle. And that's why that first step is so important. The second step is where most of us who come from a Christian tradition avoid with everything, because it's the dark, necessary crawling through the valley of darkness and tears and ashes and the painful reality of facing the mirror of your own brokenness. And this is owning and naming your resentment. That's a desire for revenge, the desire to get back. And in all humility, you realize, geez, I'm as awful as that guy who did that to me. I could do worse, not just in my mind, but in reality. And this often, for most of us, especially us men, is the longest and the hardest part of forgiveness. This is where ritual helps. This is where grieving together, not alone, can help us move more quickly. I know of men who've lived here for years in this valley of death and suffering because they refused to do the work, to take the next step. You know you're ready for the third step when you can say, simply and humbly, I'm tired of this pain. I'm tired of living with sadness. I'm tired of living with these cloaks of grief. I'm ready to move on. And you feel it. And here is the rub, if you will, the test. Have you done your work? Step 3 is when you finally realize, wow, I hate to admit it, but this has been a gift for me. I've come to embrace some of my rejected self, some of my shadow. This is the state, the stage, the step of saying, thank you. Thank you for this process. And where you turn and you bless your enemy. You bless him with kindness. You say, Father, Heavenly Creator, higher power, bless this individual, this group, with what they need right now. You know you haven't done your work if you use the blessing this way. Lord, I thank you that you've forgiven me. And for your sake and his, would you save that son of a bitch? Would you teach him how wrong he is and how he needs to get his act together? No, you haven't done your work. Back to step 2. Back to step 2. The 4th step, I know this sounds strange, but the 4th step is optional. The 4th step is you do what Richard was sharing with us this morning, and that is you realize this is bigger than you. And so this is the step we call reconciliation. You can't force reconciliation. Listen to the stories, the thousands and thousands of stories of the rejected ones, the marginalized ones, and they'll tell you that. And so this is when you let it go and you say, okay, Holy Creator, it's up to you. If you want me to be reconciled with this man, this person, this group, open the door. Show me. And if it's the will of the Creator, it will happen. How do you know? 2 days later, you get a text or an email from this person. That's the Creator. You know? Week later, you're called in the office by your boss who has ripped you to pieces. Is that the Creator? Yep. Yeah. And that's why you pray for the wisdom of putting into practice what you know to be in your gut to be true. This is one of the rivers that sets us free. Hope. Oh.
Another stream from the wisdom tradition that's important to our work is radical inclusivity. And I think of that word, reconciliation, and the need to bring all things together again. And if we truly believe that we come from a tree that unites all of us and forms us all from the same source, then there's some truth that at one point we were all one together. And we're meant to be that. It doesn't mean uniformity, but it means unity in the sense of all of our gifts having a place in this world. As Father Richard has taught us, everything belongs. Everything belongs. About 4 years ago, my wife and I made a decision to turn our lives upside down. I reached out to Belden for some words of wisdom, and he said, Joel, leap and the net will appear. Now, does that sound like good advice? And so my wife and I actually went to our favorite park in the neighborhood, and I had her climb up on a big rock with me, and I said, Kristen, let's hold hands, and we're going to leap and trust that the net will appear. Well, there are many days where we still feel as if we're falling, and that net has not yet caught us. We got rid of 3/4 of everything we own, and we sold the house we raised our 3 sons in, and we moved to Richmond, Virginia, to be a part of an intentional residential community and retreat center in the heart of what was once the capital of the Confederacy of this country. A place that has devoted itself for the past 150 years to reconciliation, to conciliation, to bringing together a people who in this country have never been treated the same. Brothers, it is gut-wrenching work. It's hard work. And we are in the midst of it right now. Brian Stevenson talks about the importance of proximity, that we have to be with the people that we love and who are a part of our community, or the communities that we say we are a part of, that we can't do this work from a distance. One of you men told me that Gregory Boyle said that we've got to go to the margins so that we can erase the margins. And if we're not there, how can that happen? If we don't reach out to one another. And so Kristen and I have been living in a racially diverse and inclusive community. We're black and white folk that live together on this hill that was at one time owned. The homes that were built and owned there were people who participated in the slave market. 2 blocks to the east of where we live is St. John's Episcopal Church, which is the second oldest Episcopal congregation in the country. And it's where Patrick Henry gave his "Give me liberty or give me death" speech. And about 5 blocks to the west of where we live is a valley called Chaco Valley. And there is an African-American burial ground down in that valley where Gabriel Prosser was hung for echoing the words of Patrick Henry, saying, "Our people need to be free too. Give us liberty or give us death." And he and his compatriots were hung. And you can still go down to that plot of ground. Much of it's been paved over because we literally tried to cover over the history. I-95 goes right over the top of most of that land. But there's a place down there known as the Devil's Half Acre. And it's a place known for a notorious slave owner named Robert Lumpkin, who abused and terrorized countless African people who came to this country. And fate would have it that upon his death, he left everything to an African-American woman who he had a common law marriage with, and her 5 children. And she made that land available to a pastor, an African-American who came through town. And eventually that place became the rising of an educational institution known as Virginia Union University, one of our historic black colleges that continues to thrive in Richmond. So there is life that comes out of the ashes. The thing that I've learned living there for the past 4 years that I invite us to consider this morning is that the only way this work can happen is if we do our own work. If we do our own work. I was a part of a group last spring that met for 5 months, and we were about 25 people. We were black and white primarily, but people of color in the circle, and there was a facilitator from Harvard who came down, and he had grown up through the Troubles in Ireland, and he's been around the world doing reconciliation work with various people, and he sat in a circle like this with us, and he introduced his work, and he said, "We're all here to do racial healing, right?" And we all said, "Yes, that's why we're here. We've been working together for 4 months." And he said, "Okay, let's do it." And the room went silent. For what seemed an eternity, and it took 10 or 15 minutes before one person could say anything. And all we could each say, because we'd been together long enough, is that I've got to change. And I've got to face my fears. And I've got to admit that I'm a part of the problem. And I can't expect the other to do it for me. I've got to recognize that we're all in this together. And so, brothers, today I want to invite all of us to consider what it means for us to be radically inclusive. What does it mean for you to radically include everything about yourself? I'm convinced that the reason we scapegoat everybody is because we have not learned to love ourselves. And to accept who we are in the fullness of our being. And that, brothers, is at the heart of our work. We do inner work that makes a difference in the world. And if we're not willing to do that work ourselves, nothing's going to change. We're always going to blame somebody else or expect them to do the hard work.
Part of this experience of growing in radical inclusivity, and at the same time including all parts of our being, recognizing what Rumi says, that anything that comes to us in the moment, in a day, in a year, in a lifetime, is a guest from beyond, and that we are to receive that divine guest as one who can teach us, inform us. I would like to conclude my part in this by sharing with you some wisdom that I received from Dr. Angeles Arion, an anthropologist before she died. She's discovered what many anthropologists have discovered, and that is, amongst the First Nation and Native peoples, that when a member of their tribe or group was hurting in some way, especially from the inside, so depressed, distressed, relationship problems, invariably the shaman or medicine man or woman would ask a series of questions. And it went like this: when did you stop singing? When did you stop dancing? When did you stop becoming enchanted with stories, especially the story of your own life? And finally, when did you stop becoming enchanted by the gift of silence? Brothers, if you've paid attention, we're doing all four every time we gather together. A little side note, in the original liturgies of the Christian church, all four were present. And when culture begins to tell us that, it's not appropriate for men to dance, it's not good to sing too loud, just sing one verse, or silence, there's too much to do, or stories, those are for kids, that those are attacks on the soul of the person and the soul of the community. We got 2 minutes.
Okay, brothers, I want to give you a chance to add something, but just a sentence if you can. What have you heard? So it might be just to echo something that came up in this time together, to just reiterate, or it might be something that has touched you or that's coming through for you that you just want to put into the circle for all the men to hear, that relates to this question: what does it mean for us to be fed by the wisdom traditions of forgiveness and radical inclusivity?
When I learn to be gentle and kind to the places in me that I have long judged, then I am safe for all others.
I definitely need to do my own work and to face my own shadows. And at the same time, be the prophetic voice that the world needs, that Illuman needs, that our communities need.
In 1963, I was walking up the steps of the First Baptist Church in Tallahassee, Florida. A black student happened to be walking up the steps with me, and suddenly 3 white men, deacons from the church, stepped out and said, "You are not welcome here." And I stepped over and said, "Why?" And they looked at me those three huge white men, and I saw white authority for the first time in my life. It scared the shit out of me. I learned I was white that morning, with all that means for me. Oh.
What I've heard and what I've learned as a 6 on the Enneagram is that I need not be afraid of the different, the strange, the foreigner, whether in human disguise or disguise as an idea or thought or relationship. I'm being invited to a larger, more spacious life. Oh.
I'm just thinking of that Hafiz poem that I love so dearly that speaks deep to me. The small man builds cages for everyone he knows. And I've built them. And I've celebrated them. But in these days, the sage who must duck his head when the moon is low keeps dropping keys all night long for the beautiful, rowdy prisoners. And may it be so. Oh.
I might believe in the importance of radical inclusivity and want to affirm that. But the place for me to do that work is starting with the places that my body is telling me otherwise, that I don't believe that. And so the hard places, the tremors, the reactions that are coming in a visceral place is a good place for me to start. Oh.
Brothers, there's an inner work and an outer work to justice. And we want to invite you deeply into that inner work in our time together here. And so we send you onto the land. We send you out there into the more than human world and invite you into a conversation with everything around you. And I encourage you to look for something that is radically included out there. Everything belongs. Everything is there. Everything you need to teach you and to transform you. And so look for signs of forgiveness, even in the land. And look for signs of radical inclusivity in all that is out there. And I invite you to open your mouth and actually have a conversation. To remember that what we don't talk to, we don't understand. And what we don't understand, we fear, and what we fear, eventually we destroy. So start the conversation today. Even if it feels a little awkward, just walk up to a tree or a shrub or a squirrel, or if you're really lucky, a coyote, and introduce yourself and say, I am here to learn something about forgiveness. I'm here to learn something about what it means to be radically inclusive in my life. And when you hear the drum, it will call you to counsel, and your first prompt will be to share what happened out there in the wild. So go with the intention to find out and to let it happen and to begin to work on you. And in that conversation, remember to include yourself. What is it you need to forgive? What is it you need to radically include in your life? I'd like to meet with the council carriers just back by the large drum in the back of the room. But brothers, we ask that you move quietly and as quickly as you can out and to have as much time as you can on the land before we call you to council.